In this video, I am going to tell you 5 tips on how you can tell a better story on TikTok. Now this is going to be something that applies to actual storytelling, whether you're giving people information, whether you're trying to just show off something. It's going to apply to everything you try to tell your audience on TikTok. So strap in and let's get to it. Tip number 1, you need to grab your audience's attention right away. If you're making a video that's informative, tell them what you're about to explain. If you have something that you're about to show off, tell them what you're about to show off to them. If you're about to tell them an actual story about something that just happened to you on your job, you need to lead off with something that's going to build them into the story. So you can say something like, let me tell you why hating coffee and working at Starbucks is a perfect combination. Saying something like this right off the bat is going to grab somebody's attention. Everyone's going to be wondering why somebody that hates coffee is going to love at Starbucks. And they're going to be wondering why you think that is a perfect combination. You want to have your audience thinking at the very beginning of your videos, this is pretty interesting. I think I might stick around for a little bit. If you can effectively do that at the beginning of your video, you have your audience's attention, and that's going to help them stick around for at least a little bit longer. And that leads into tip number 2, and that's going straight into what you promised your audience you were going to tell them. This step is extremely important, simply because you have your audience's initial attention, so you need to do what you can to keep them around. And to keep them around, you need to deliver on what you said you were going to tell them. Not only do you need to tell them what you promised you were going to tell them, you can't go off on any tangents. If you start going off on certain tangents, then people are going to lose interest because that's not why they're trying to stick around for your video. You made a promise to them at the beginning, so they expect to hear exactly what you promised them. So going off on tangents just simply isn't gonna work. Plus you're on TikTok, so you're time restricted anyway, and going off on tangents is probably gonna take away from the story that you're trying to tell. And you probably won't have enough time to tell your full story anyway. So you need to maximize the 60 seconds that you have for your videos. So again, make sure you avoid any tangents and stick to the story that you promised your audience. Now going on to tip number 3, and this is going to sound very similar to tip number 2, but it's a little different, and that is avoid adding any fluff to your story. What I mean by this is you only want to add the details that are going to help your story along. You may not necessarily be going off on tangents when you add certain details, but those details may not add to the overall point of the story that you're trying to display. Think about it like this. I know there was a point for all of us when we were in school and we were writing a paper, and the paper had to be a certain amount of words, and we didn't know how to reach that word limit. We only needed a few more words to reach our word limit. So what do? We add a few fluff words in there. We add stuff we may have already said. We add little things. We add extra words that don't really need to be there. They don't really add anything to the story, but they just helped us get to our word count. When you're telling a story on TikTok, you don't want to do that. Again, this is something that could very well send your audience away. And on TikTok, you want people to stick around for as long as possible in your videos. That is how you get more followers. That is how you get more people to watch your videos. That is how you go viral. The more people watch your videos, the more likely you are to be successful on TikTok. So if you have a story that's only going to take 45 seconds to tell it in 45 seconds. You don't need to add any words to try and reach 1 minute. Again, because if you're adding those small details that don't really add anything to the story, you're going to take away from the overall quality of your video. And trust me, people love quality content from start to finish. If they're watching a video and they end up not liking something, they're probably going to keep scrolling because, hey, they have nothing better to do, so there's no point in them sticking around for the rest of your video. So avoid any details that may not add to the overall story. You don't need a full 60 seconds to tell a very effective story. Now we're going to move on to tip number 4, and that is you have to learn to pace yourself through a story. Because TikTok has that time restriction, you may find yourself talking a little fast. You may find yourself possibly rushing through the story just so you can fit it all in that time frame. But this is something that you need to be careful of, because if you're talking too fast, all the words are going to get jumbled and people aren't going to understand what you're trying to tell them. And if you're rushing through a story, the effectiveness of that story isn't going to reach your audience. You can have the greatest story out there, but if you tell it and it's rushed, your audience is going to recognize that and they're not going to like the story as much as they probably should have. Think about some TV shows where the last season, they just try and fit as much information as possible into one season, and everything just feels rushed. Usually the last season of shows just aren't nearly as good as the previous seasons. That happens with a lot of TV shows. They try to pack everything they can into that last season. They try to fill any holes that might be out there, but those holes that need to be filled, they're rushed to be filled. And when something's rushed like that, the story just isn't nearly as good. If you know that your story is going to take longer than 60 seconds, be sure to inform your audience that this story is going to be in multiple parts. Whether it's at the beginning or the end, just let your audience know that this story is going to be more than 60 seconds long. So that's why you might see on TikTok people saying like for part 2. Personally, I like to say at the beginning of my videos, this is part 1, this is part 2. That way they know right away that this is going to be multiple parts, and if they want to stick around, cool. If not, it's okay. The only reason I don't like telling your audience at the end is because I feel like if you build the story up very well, yes, they may want to stick around for part 2, but it's kind of anticlimactic when you say, oh, hey, like for part 2. That's just a personal preference of mine. A lot of people do it. It's very effective still, so you don't have to listen to me on that. But again, I like to tell my audience at the beginning, this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part whatever. So just as long as you're letting your audience know that this story is going to be in multiple parts, you're going to be okay. Moving on to our 5th and final tip, and that is going to be you have to keep things moving along throughout your story. You don't want things to be too static while you're telling your story. What do I mean by this? I mean that you want to have breaks in the action that kind of show that there's just some sort of break in the filming. For example, videos where the person is just talking straight to the phone for 60 seconds, no breaks, no cuts or anything, those videos are a bit harder to watch simply because people's attention spans are very short. However, when you see videos that have jump cuts, that have different types of cuts to them, changes of scenery, those types of videos people have an easier time watching just because those little breaks in the action help us refocus our attention on the video. So for example, this video, I've had breaks in the action, I've had jump cuts, I've added B-roll, I've added things that would make you refocus while you're watching this video. Because if it was just me and you right now and there were no breaks in between these 10 minutes, I guarantee you wouldn't be lasting this long into the video. Plus, keeping things moving in your videos is gonna make them seem a lot more interesting. You can be one of the most boring people in the world. Hey, this video may be boring, but if you made it this far, there's something that's keeping your attention, and for me, I believe it's those breaks in the action. I'm keeping things moving the way they should be moving. And the knowledge that you're gaining from this video is pretty good. And with this tip, you need to keep in mind that it truly depends on the type of story that you're trying to tell. If you're a musician trying to show off your music or your singing abilities, then you may not want to have any breaks in action because that's just going to throw the whole video off. But for most people, they're not going to be showing off their musical talent. They're not going to be doing something that requires the video to not have any breaks. Most videos are going to have breaks in them, so make sure you utilize those breaks effectively to keep your story moving along. Again, these breaks can come in the form of a jump cut, a change in scenery, changing your outfit, changing the way you're holding your camera. Little things like that are going to help people stick around, refocus on your video, and watch it all the way through. So remember, on TikTok, you want people to stick around for your videos as long as possible. And the way to do that is through an effective story. And how do you tell an effective story? You can tell an effective story on TikTok with the 5 tips I mentioned in this video. Well, that's all I got for you. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well. And if you want to follow me on TikTok, since this video is about TikTok, you might as well watch my TikTok too. Follow me at DareToCapture. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say. I'm Steven from DareToCapture. Catch you in the next one. Peace.